In 1884, the iron heel of the British Empire had trampled across more than a quarter of the world's land. For the young men of the empire, there was no higher honor than to fight and bleed for queen and country. And for those who refused conscription or shrank from the front lines, it meant bringing indelible shame upon their families and friends. The symbol of this disgrace was a single white feather, representing cowardice. The story's protagonist, Harry, was the brightest rising star in the Royal Cumbrian Regiment. Harry came from a prestigious family. His father was a distinguished general, and he had a beautiful fiancée, Ethne, whom he was about to marry. In everyone's eyes, Harry possessed a perfect life with a boundless future.
Good night, Ethne. We have to take him home.
Good night, gentlemen.
However, a sudden war was about to completely rewrite his destiny. In the Sudan, an army composed of fanatical believers raided a British fortress, wiping out the entire garrison. To seek revenge and demonstrate the empire's glory, several units, including the Royal Cumbrian Regiment, were ordered to deploy to the Sudanese battlefield within a week. When the news arrived, his comrades' blood boiled, and they cheered at the prospect of finally taking to the field to kill the enemy. Only Harry, amidst the reveling crowd, had eyes filled with fear and inner conflict. He could never understand why he should lay down his life for the Queen in a distant desert.
Aren't you afraid you won't come back?
Jack admitted that he too was afraid, but the reason he was going was that Harry and all their brothers were going. He was willing to entrust his life to Harry. Jack's trust was like a sharp blade that pierced deeply into Harry's heart. The next day, as everyone prepared for the expedition, Harry made a decision that shocked them all.
I wish to resign my commission.
He would resign his commission, becoming a deserter on the eve of war. The colonel was enraged by his actions, but out of respect for his father, gave him one chance to reconsider. But Harry's mind was made up, and he was ultimately ordered to leave the barracks immediately. The news quickly reached his friends. Tom was furious, bluntly denouncing Harry as a coward.
Harry's a disgrace. He's disgraced the regiment. Jack!
His best friend Jack tried to defend him, but was rendered speechless by a single question from Tom.
Did he talk to any of you? He's left our backs exposed, and he doesn't even have the courage to tell us.
Harry left without saying goodbye, lacking the courage to explain in person. This cowardly act deeply hurt every brother who had once trusted him. Tom, William, and Castleton each sent him a white feather representing cowardice. Meanwhile, Harry was naively explaining to his fiancée, Ethne, that he had resigned his commission simply because he didn't want to wait so long to get married. Ethne was deceived by his lie until a servant delivered that shameful envelope.
Feathers of cowardice.
The truth exposed, Harry was forced to admit that the army was about to deploy to the Sudan. Ethne urged him to go back and explain himself. She didn't believe he could be a coward, but Harry shouted that it had nothing to do with her.
Nothing to do with you, Ethne. I never wanted to join the army.
He had never wanted to join the army in the first place, and had done it all solely to please his father. Ethne broke down. She asked Harry if he truly didn't care how others saw him, or about the trust Jack had placed in him. With eyes full of disappointment and finality, Ethne plucked the fourth feather from her fan. In the crowd seeing off the troops, he attempted to speak with his father, but was callously treated as a stranger. Abandoned by the whole world, Harry finally realized that unless he did something, this brand of cowardice would haunt him for the rest of his life. He secretly left London, leaving a letter for Ethne in which he vowed to face his fears alone and prove he was no coward. He arrived in the Sudan and found a guide named Abu, asking to be taken to the British camp. Abu warned him that he must learn to pass as an Arab. Otherwise, if discovered by the Mahdi's army, he would surely die. Meanwhile, Jack and his friends were already fighting in the Sudan. In a skirmish, they were ambushed by snipers and suffered heavy casualties. The cruelty of war far exceeded the imaginations of these pampered aristocratic officers. Elsewhere, Harry had donned local attire and joined Abu's caravan, embarking on a journey across the desert. He stopped Abu from whipping a female slave, displaying a kindness distinct from the typical British attitude. Abu told him that the British tried to civilize this land with Christianity, but they didn't understand these savage souls at all. In the harsh desert, Harry gradually shed his former cowardice, becoming tough and alert. A mysterious black warrior named Abu Fatma noticed him and warned him that there were Mahdi spies in the camp, putting him in grave danger. Abu Fatma claimed that God had sent him to protect Harry, leaving Harry bewildered. "Why are you hiding from your own people?" Abu Fatma asked. Harry confessed that he was a deserter who had fled because of fear. Abu Fatma disagreed. A man who dared to cross the desert alone was certainly no coward. Just then, they spotted a group of Mahdi scouts. Harry insisted on following them to discover their objective. They trailed them and discovered that the scouts' destination was the British fortress at Abu Klea. Harry instantly realized that the fortress had already fallen, and this was a trap to lure the main British force. He told Abu Fatma to go warn his friends immediately, while he himself was captured by the enemy. Abu Fatma rushed to the British camp with Harry's warning, but the officer in charge of the outpost was Tom, who hated Harry to the core. He refused to believe a word of this savage's nonsense. He ordered Abu Fatma to be severely tortured to force him to reveal who had sent him. Abu Fatma insisted he was sent by a British officer, but Tom forced him to lick the blood of a fallen soldier from the ground. The British army missed their final warning and marched step by step into a death trap. The Mahdi's vast army surged from all directions, forcing the British to form a defensive square. Dense volley fire temporarily repelled the first wave of attacks. But just as they thought victory was in sight and deployed skirmishers to pursue, another, larger force of enemy cavalry launched a fatal charge from their rear. In the attempt to rescue the trapped skirmishers, a gap opened in the square, and the Mahdi's army flooded in like a tide.
It's not the British!
Brutal hand-to-hand battle ensued, and the British forces were instantly routed. British soldiers in Castleton fell one after another. In the chaos, Jack was hit by artillery fire and blinded. In despair, Tom ordered a retreat, but it was too late. They were met with a massacre. When the smoke cleared, bodies littered the field. Harry found a dying Jack amongst the pile of the dead. Jack could no longer see. He clutched Ethne's letter tightly, unaware that the man saving him was his one-time best friend.
Think that I could ever go back home. I can't.
Disguised as an Arab, Harry escorted Jack all the way to safety before disappearing into the desert once more. Jack returned to England. Ethne came to visit him and announced that she had decided to marry him. Shortly after, Tom, who had also survived, returned with shocking news.
I saw Harry, Jack.
He had seen Harry in the Sudan. Harry was not only alive, but had saved him.
I said, get out, or I'll have you whipped, you filthy wog!
Like you had my friend whipped.
For God's sake, what are you doing here?
More importantly, Harry believed their other friend, William, was not dead, but had been captured, and he was going to rescue him. Jack was shocked. He asked Tom why he hadn't said so sooner, but Tom replied that giving Ethne hope would be cruel. Meanwhile, Harry and Abu Fatma were planning something even more insane. He intended to get captured on purpose to infiltrate the Mahdi's most notorious prison and find William from the inside. Harry used Abu Fatma's own logic to refute him. Life or death is all God's will. Abu Fatma helplessly called him his foolish friend, but agreed to help him. Life in the prison was like hell. Amidst the despairing crowd, Harry finally found William. His former comrade was now little more than a skeleton. William couldn't believe that Harry had followed him all the way there for the sake of a feather. William had lost the will to live, but Harry refused to give up. Through Abu Fatma, he obtained a poison from the outside that could induce a state of fake death, planning a daring escape. The two took the poison and were thrown into the corpse pit by guards who believed they were dead. That night, Abu Fatma arrived with camels and dug them out of the pile of bodies. William's body was paralyzed by the poison, and he couldn't move while pursuers were closing in. With only one bullet left, Abu Fatma left the hope of survival to Harry, staying behind to cover their retreat, his fate unknown. Back in England, the first thing Harry did was visit Ethne to return the feather that had once brought him endless shame, but now symbolized courage. Things had changed. Ethne was about to marry Jack. She said painfully that, in the future, they could only drink tea and chat like friends, as if nothing had ever happened. Because he still loved her, and that love had never changed. Later, Harry went to see Jack. He thanked Jack for being the only one to speak up for him when all their friends were accusing him. Jack, however, told him that he had the right to try to change Ethne's mind. Jack recalled the past. No matter how many honors he won, Ethne only ever had eyes for Harry.
Nothing's changed.
He knew that he had never truly possessed her heart. At the memorial service for the fallen soldiers, Harry's father, the general, presided. Jack spoke of the cruelty of the battlefield and the bonds between comrades. Finally, he looked at Harry and gave him the welcome he'd been waiting for. Father and son were finally reconciled.
Come on, Harry.
Ethne also apologized to Harry, regretting her past heartlessness, but Harry told her there was nothing to forgive.
Forgive me. I did you a great wrong.
There is nothing to forgive.
Harry took Ethne's hand and said he had no choice, for it was God who had brought her to him. At the end of the story, Abu Fatma led his camel and walked solitarily into the depths of the desert. He had fulfilled God's will and was embarking on a new journey of his own.